There are nights when the city slowly falls silent. The noise of traffic fades into the distance. A warm light slips gently through the window, while the quiet ticking of a clock reminds us that another day is coming to an end. In moments like these, when everything around us finally becomes still, our minds often begin asking the questions we usually avoid during the busy hours of the day. Perhaps you've wondered why some people seem able to transform even the most impossible dreams into reality, while others spend years imagining a better future that never seems to arrive. Is success simply reserved for those born with extraordinary talent? Is it the reward for people who were fortunate enough to have wealthy families, influential mentors, or opportunities that never came our way? Or could there be something far more powerful quietly shaping every successful life? For generations, society has encouraged us to believe that success is mostly determined by circumstances. We hear stories about gifted individuals, brilliant entrepreneurs, and fortunate investors, and we begin convincing ourselves that they possessed something we never had. Slowly, almost without noticing, we accept the comforting belief that our limitations were decided long before we ever had the chance to choose our own path. It is an easy story to believe because it removes the burden of responsibility, but it also quietly steals away the possibility of becoming something greater. More than 100 years ago, one man refused to accept that explanation. His name was Napoleon Hill. Rather than relying on opinions or popular beliefs, he devoted decades of his life to discovering what truly separated extraordinary achievers from ordinary people. Instead of asking what successful people owned, he asked how they thought. Instead of focusing on their wealth, he searched for the invisible habits and beliefs that existed long before success ever appeared in their lives. Hill spent years interviewing some of the greatest entrepreneurs, inventors, and business leaders of his generation. He listened to their victories, but he also listened carefully to their failures. He noticed that behind every remarkable achievement stood years of uncertainty, disappointment, rejection, and sacrifice. Yet despite those hardships, they all shared one remarkable characteristic. They refused to abandon the vision they carried within themselves. Even when nobody else believed in them, they continued believing in the future they could already see in their own minds. After thousands of conversations and countless hours of observation, Hill reached a conclusion that challenged everything most people believed about success. Wealth was not the beginning. Talent was not the beginning. Luck was not the beginning. Behind every extraordinary accomplishment stood one powerful force, a burning desire, not an ordinary wish, not a passing dream, but a desire so intense that it shaped every decision, every habit, and every sacrifice along the journey. And that raises a fascinating question. Can a single idea, held with enough conviction, truly change the direction of an ordinary life? To answer that question, we must travel back to the meeting that changed Napoleon Hill's life forever. The story began with a meeting that at first glance seemed almost ordinary. A young journalist named Napoleon Hill was invited to interview Andrew Carnegie, the legendary steel industrialist whose fortune had become one of the greatest of his time. Hill expected a simple interview that would last a few hours. Instead, their conversation stretched far longer than expected. Carnegie was less interested in answering questions than in understanding the young man sitting across from him. He listened carefully. He observed Hill's curiosity, his discipline, and his willingness to learn. Then, before the meeting ended, Carnegie made an unexpected proposal. He challenged Hill to devote his life to discovering the principles behind extraordinary success. The task was ambitious beyond imagination. It would require interviewing hundreds of accomplished men and women, studying their habits, comparing their experiences, and identifying the invisible patterns that connected them all. Carnegie offered no financial reward. There would be no salary, no guarantee of recognition, and no certainty that the project would ever succeed. What he offered instead was an opportunity to uncover knowledge that could benefit generations of people searching for a better life. Imagine receiving such an invitation. Most people would hesitate. Many would politely decline. Spending years, perhaps decades, on a project with no promise of income would appear reckless. Friends might call it unrealistic. Family members might question the decision. Yet Hill accepted without knowing exactly where the journey would lead. Looking back, it becomes clear that this was the first great demonstration of the very principle he would later teach. His decision was driven not by certainty, but by desire. Long before he explained the power of burning desire in his writing, he had already chosen to live by it. Over the next 20 years, Hill met some of the most influential people of the modern age. He spoke with Thomas Edison, whose inventions transformed everyday life. He learned from Henry Ford, who reshaped manufacturing through innovation and persistence. He observed business leaders, inventors, judges, politicians, and entrepreneurs. Their industries were different. Their personalities were different. Their paths to success were rarely alike. Yet beneath those differences, Hill discovered a remarkable similarity. Every one of them possessed a clear purpose that remained steady even when circumstances became difficult. Many of these individuals experienced repeated failures before achieving the success history remembers. Some lost businesses. Others faced public criticism. Some invested years into ideas that seemed impossible, yet failure never became their final identity. Instead, each setback became another lesson, another adjustment, another opportunity to improve. They refused to measure their future by their current situation. They understood that temporary defeat and permanent failure were not the same thing. As Hill reviewed thousands of pages of notes, collected over 2 decades, one conclusion appeared again and again. Success did not begin with wealth, education, connections, or even exceptional intelligence. It began with a decision so powerful that it transformed ordinary effort into extraordinary persistence. Hill called that force a burning desire, a desire that survives disappointment, grows stronger through adversity, and quietly shapes every choice until the vision held in the mind slowly becomes reality. In the next chapter, we'll explore the remarkable story of Edwin Barnes, a man whose unwavering decision became one of the greatest examples of this principle in action. Among all the stories Napoleon Hill collected during his research, one remained unforgettable. It wasn't the story of the richest businessman or the greatest inventor. It was the story of an ordinary young man named Edwin Barnes. Barnes had no impressive education. He came from no influential family. He possessed neither wealth nor status. If someone had looked at his circumstances, they would have seen nothing unusual. Yet inside his mind lived a decision so powerful that it would eventually change the direction of his entire life. Barnes did not simply hope to work for Thomas Edison. His dream reached much further than that. He decided he would become Edison's business partner. To almost everyone who heard those words, the idea sounded absurd. How could a poor young man with no connections ever stand beside one of the greatest inventors in history? Every logical argument suggested the dream was impossible. But Barnes viewed the situation differently. He refused to measure his future by the conditions of his present. With very little money in his pocket, Barnes made the journey to meet Edison. The trip itself was uncomfortable, uncertain, and filled with hardship. Yet every mile represented something far greater than physical travel. It represented commitment. While most people wait until circumstances become perfect before taking action, Barnes acted first and trusted that the path would reveal itself one step at a time. His desire had already become stronger than his fear. When Barnes finally arrived, he did not immediately become Edison's partner. In fact, he accepted a modest position within the company. To an outside observer, it may have appeared that he had failed to achieve his original goal. But Barnes never considered it a defeat. He understood that beginnings are often humble. Every task, no matter how ordinary, became another opportunity to prove his reliability, his determination, and his willingness to contribute. He never allowed temporary circumstances to redefine his ultimate vision. Months passed. Then, more months. Opportunities appeared only occasionally, and many of them seemed insignificant. Yet Barnes remained prepared. When Edison introduced a new business machine that few salespeople believed in, Barnes saw something different. While others ignored the opportunity, he recognized the chance he had been patiently waiting for. He devoted himself completely to promoting the product, and his extraordinary commitment produced impressive results. Edison noticed not only the sales, but the unwavering confidence behind them. That moment became the turning point. Barnes eventually earned the business partnership he had imagined long before anyone else believed it was possible. His story reminds us that success rarely arrives in a single dramatic moment. More often, it grows quietly through consistent action, patient preparation, and an unshakable decision to continue moving forward. The lesson is simple, yet profound. A burning desire is not measured by what you say you want. It is measured by what you continue doing when success still seems far away. Although Edwin C. Barnes lived more than a century ago, the principle behind his story feels even more relevant today. We live in a world filled with endless distractions. Every time we unlock our phones, we are surrounded by carefully edited images of success. Someone has built a $1 million company before turning 30. Someone else is traveling the world, buying luxury homes, or celebrating achievements that seem impossibly far ahead of where we are. Without realizing it, we begin measuring our lives against carefully selected moments from someone else's journey. This constant comparison quietly changes the way we think. Instead of asking what we truly want, we begin asking what everyone else appears to want. We chase trends because they are popular. We choose careers because they look impressive. We pursue goals that earn admiration instead of fulfillment. Yet Napoleon Hill reminds us that genuine desire never grows from comparison. A borrowed dream rarely survives the first serious obstacle. Only a goal that truly belongs to you has the strength to carry you through years of uncertainty and sacrifice. That is why Hill encouraged every reader to become completely honest with themselves. Before asking how to succeed, ask why you want to succeed. What kind of life would genuinely bring you peace? What contribution do you hope to make? What legacy do you hope to leave behind? These questions have no universal answers. They are deeply personal, and the clearer those answers become, the stronger your desire begins to grow. Clarity creates commitment. Commitment creates persistence. Persistence gradually creates results. Hill also introduced a simple daily practice that remains surprisingly powerful even in today's fast-moving world. Write down your primary goal in clear and specific language. Describe exactly what you intend to achieve. Decide when you hope to accomplish it. Most importantly, write what you are willing to give in return. Every meaningful achievement requires an investment. It may be your time, your discipline, your patience, your willingness to keep learning after repeated disappointment. Read those words every morning before the world captures your attention. Read them again every evening before you fall asleep. Let them become a quiet conversation between you and your future self. Over time, those repeated words begin shaping your decisions in ways you may not immediately notice. Small choices start moving in the same direction. Habits become more intentional. Opportunities that once seemed invisible suddenly become easier to recognize because your mind has learned what it is looking for. Desire alone does not guarantee success, but without desire, lasting success rarely has a place to begin. Every remarkable accomplishment first existed as an idea, protected by someone who refused to let it disappear. So perhaps, when this chapter ends, don't rush to the next task, waiting for your attention. Instead, spend just a few quiet moments with yourself. Write one honest sentence describing the future you truly want to build, not the future that impresses strangers, but the one that gives your own life meaning. Because every extraordinary journey begins with a single decision, a decision to believe that your future does not have to look like your present. And in the next chapter, we'll explore the force that gives desire its greatest strength: faith.